Welcome to Spark and Scale, the show for higher ed leaders learning, experimenting, and evolving how we shape our future. I'm your host, Mickey Baines. Come and join me. It's time to get started. We're back to another episode of Spark and Scale. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really excited to have Zack Perkins on this episode. We've been planning this for a few weeks. We've been timing this around to a new launch that Zack and his colleagues at CollegeVine have. I was blown away when I saw this 2 weeks ago. I think Zack saw me wipe my chin. I had a little drool coming down with some really cool functionality. And I'm excited to bring this to everyone here. If you haven't seen already on LinkedIn or other social sites or the CollegeVine site, they dropped a little video highlighting some of this functionality. We're going to dive in deeper today to show you some of the new features that CollegeVine is rolling out with their product. Zack, thank you for joining me. Excited to have you and share more about what you have released.
Yes, well, thank you for having me, Mickey. I'm super excited for our conversation. And in particular, I think today we'll be talking a lot about data, CRM stuff, a lot there. And I consider you quite an inspiration in that category. And so I think we'll nerd out a little bit and go into some cool areas.
Well, thank you for that. And yet we're going to nerd out. That's when I get to have these conversations, that is all I like to do is to really nerd out on these. Zack Perkins, the CEO and co-founder of CollegeVine. What I would like to talk a little bit about just for a couple of minutes, how did you start the company? What was the moment that said, this is an idea, we have to do this? Where did that start?
Yeah, great question. So it's been a very long journey. Today, we're a platform for deploying AI all across university campuses, but it did not start that way. In fact, when we originally started the company, we dropped out of school, ironically, to help students find their dream college. We built something that we used to call kind of like a LinkedIn for high school students. Basically a way for students to build a profile, meet schools, and really sort of democratize access to different colleges. So we did that for a couple of years, and it was very much a cool product, a cool platform, and we made a lot of amazing connections between students and colleges. But everything changed right around, I'd say, April 2024. We started to realize that enrollment teams were not actually engaging with our students as much as we wanted. And we were like, hey, why aren't you talking to these students? Like, they're here, they want to meet you. And I remember the moment I had a fantastic conversation with an enrollment leader who said, have you seen my calendar? Do you know how many things that we do every single day? I don't have time to interact with all these students. And that's when we realized, that's like maybe an even bigger problem that we've got to solve. And so in April, we launched something a couple of years ago called our AI Recruiter, which was our first foray into deploying AI on campus. And the goal was, can we deploy an agent that would help enrollment teams with all manner of operational challenges, interacting with students, and so on. And it was quite successful. And from there, basically every other department on campus started asking, can you deploy agents for us? And that's where we realized we want to build a platform that makes it easy for every department to deploy with AI. And that's what we've been doing. So that's how we got here. It's been a long journey, but very rewarding.
Well, was the first, when you rolled that out back in 24, was that a phone? Was that the phone agent?
We were, I believe, the first
recruiter?
conversational agent in higher ed.
Yeah. Yes. And I remember that demo, and I remember my first conversation with Emily Smith, and she and I were going back and forth. She, I had made the phone call and talked for a few minutes with it, and was so impressed. And it was the first higher ed voice agent I had ever interacted with, and I was really impressed at that moment. I think one of the things that I think is a misnomer for folks that may have known that or have an idea of that is you've spread out across the entire operation, as you said, but it's not just phone agents. That's a piece of it, but that's not exclusively all you do. Tell us a little about how you've expanded over the year, where within the operation you've expanded, maybe also the channels that folks are using these agents to connect with students and staff.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Mick, if you go and later, if you'd like, I can have you call that original agent. You'd probably be like, this agent is so stupid. It's speaking so strangely. It's a sign of the times how far we've come. Like that back then was crazy impressive, but just now, as you know, it's even more insane. I think we originally started with student-facing conversational agents, honestly, because the models at that time were good enough to help mediate individualized interactions between students and the institution. Where we've really traversed over the last 2 years, as the foundational models have gotten so much better to do long-running autonomous work, reasoning, tool use, computer use, we basically realized that a better way to think about AI is it's much more like an internal operator, like a team member that can do lots of things. And one place where it shows up is, of course, interacting in the outside world with constituents, students, alums, that kind of thing. But another whole category that honestly these days is maybe the majority of what we do is just even internal operations. Agents that can go and help with really complicated processing tasks in the office. Agents that can help with analyzing procurement data and handling duplicate suppliers. We deploy agents into virtually every single department on campus. And the use cases are ultimately, there's a complex job we need to do. And insofar as we can use intelligence to do that better and more effective and create a better experience for our constituents or help us retain more revenue or reduce costs, we'll do that. And so we take a much more holistic view of AI, and just sort of conversational work is just one way you can express it. The thing that we launched recently, I think, is a kind of trying to pointedly show there's many different ways AI can show up in enrollment that actually initially doesn't even need to interact with the student, but can be exceptionally powerful to drive enrollment generally within the office.
So what made you know that, okay, we've got this agent, we're supporting in the enrollment cycle, but we're going to expand beyond that? What was like the real, maybe the moment, I don't know if there was an epiphany or some moment said, we have to keep going beyond. I know you said folks are asking for it, but how did you know, like, this is really needed, we have to do this and keep that expansion going?
Yeah, great question. Well, so I think what's fascinating about just higher ed generally is that ultimately, I think everyone sort of is focused on the day-to-day, the complexity of the operation, but there's a very real student journey that exists that we all show up to deliver on. And so there's actually a very natural path of, we've shown up really well for our prospective students here, but very soon they become current students who have a totally different set of challenges, problems than we want to deliver on. So there was this very nice continuity. We're starting enrollment, immediately made adjacent offices care deeply about what happens after they are enrolled, especially if their first experience with the university was a lot more personalized. So that happened kind of naturally. And then in parallel, as we did a lot of back office work, like we started doing a lot of work early on to help enrollment offices process their transcripts and do a whole bunch of like back office sort of processing work. Other departments that had gnarly work like that realized there was a huge parallel. And I think at that time, the mental model of AI as this co-operator started to appear, and that was an easy extension for us.
So talk maybe just briefly, what are the key new pieces of functionality that you rolled out this week?
Yeah, so I think maybe your audience might be somewhat familiar that within enrollment, we deploy agents to go help with a whole bunch of tasks up and down the office. What we've really been working on for several months now, and this is sort of our public release, has been available for our partners for a little while, is starting to allow that agent that is normally outside in the world and doing even internal back office work to be even more intimately plugged into the real-time data of the enrollment funnel. And on the first order, that's interesting because, as we'll get into, there's a lot of really cool work you can do there. But on the second order, you realize that being plugged into that is actually the origin point of all of the operational work we do. It is almost where the truth lives that then spawns the next action. So it is in one part a capability, I guess I would say, that we've really sort of focused on. But in another part, it is a mode of operating that we've now made sort of the default. And I think that duality is interesting, and maybe we'll get into that as we show it.
Great. When we talk about real time has in higher ed a couple of different meanings. Most of them, when I talk with folks about real time, for them, it's really near real time, which could be 15 minutes, an hour, or a day old data. And now we're when we say real time, we're talking in the moment real time data because we're plugged directly in. And how have you built this? I guess when we say it's connected to the CRM, tell me a little bit more about what that means.
Yeah, great question. So a good way to just even think about agents generally is they are, let's say, only as powerful as the tools they have access to and maybe the environment they're in. Our agents ultimately are like inside of a computer. It's kind of a fun thing. I like to think of them as little machine elves in a computer that do very important work for us. And the tools they have access to is how they interact with the outside world. So the agents in a computer, it's actually calling tools, and that's causing things to happen. One such class of tool is data access. And so to your point, yes, like the faster you can get access to data, the better you can do things with it. You can operate on it in real time. And so we took a look at basically every major CRM in higher ed, and each one is very, very, very different. There's a lot of intimate details of how integrations can happen, how you can get data out. And we thought about, in the context of what needs to happen in enrollment, what is the right way that we can make the tool available to the agent to get that data as fast as possible? And in virtually every case, we have near real time here. Now, as part of that, we have to do some pretty interesting technical work to make sure that we're very metered in how we hit those systems and do it in a really safe way generally. But yes, we're really pleased with some of the technical work we've done to make that possible.
So, well, let's see this in action.
All right, great. And Mickey, we're going to nerd out on data here. I'm excited to actually, I will drive some, but I would love to like even see what you want to drive.
Great.
You can see my screen here. Let's make sure everyone's got it.
Yes.
Great. So I'm actually on a public version of our agent, which as part of this, we actually just made public because to your point, Mickey, like AI is moving so fast. I actually think a lot of the world maybe hasn't fully experienced what a frontier agent is that has access to a computer and can do some really interesting long running work. So we actually made one of our agents just publicly available. And anyone can go and actually interact with it. So I figured we'd start there so everyone can kind of see like.
I think that's great. Yes. I love that it's public, by the way. I mean, that's, just to be able to go out there and say, okay, well, what does this mean? Let me see it. And it's one thing to have an agent or jump on a chat GPT or something like that, but to actually interface with something that has data to see what this is. Because when we looked at it, one of the things that stands out to me is I've been trying to describe for a while the shift that's happening in analytics and understanding of what's happening from an enrollment perspective and the way that AI is going to change that. We live in a world of dashboards. I get asked all the time about dashboards. Dashboards aren't going away, but they're not necessarily the real meat of what we need to know about insights and analytics today. And so AI is allowing us to really dive much deeper to see what's happening and understand more clearly what's happening. So I'm excited to see to have that publicly available. I think is fantastic that people can go interact and start to experience that for themselves.
Yeah, we've already seen some pretty wild analyses that people have done that have just been very creative, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Like, I'd love to see that answer in your institution's data.
And you might actually find some actual probably use cases there that you can apply and at least show your clients as you're helping them implement.
Yes.
So what do we have here? We see an initial prompt opening up. We see a deposit pace. I like that.
Yep.
So it starts and it opens up. Great first prompt because that's probably a lot of what people are saying. Yes.
So maybe here's a good mental model for just what this is. Some folks, I think, have thought of this as sort of a standalone agent. It's actually really not. This is actually, and many of our partners call this their AI recruiter. This is just your AI recruiter that you're just talking to. And in fact, the main way you interact with your agent today, the one that even interacts with students in the outside world, is you just talk to it. You can call it, you can just text it as the administrator on campus, which is very cool. Like I can text my agent and say, hey, I need you to go run this analysis for me.
So you said you can call it, you can text it. When you said call, you don't mean phone call.
No, I mean like phone. You can phone.
So,
you can call.
So if I wanted to, if I don't know who's calling, if that's the old school person or the younger person, but if I'm old school and I like to actually get on the phone, I could call up and do have the same experience through a phone call.
My dream is that everyone's morning commute can be a quick distillation of where we are, point in time on everything going on in the enrollment operation. And you can absolutely make that phone call on your commute. And we've given voice capabilities to the outside world for like students for a long time. That sort of was the first place where AI went for interacting with the outside world. But our view is like the core operation actually happens within the enrollment office. So we should make that operating style a lot better. And this is what I mean about like this co-operator. So this demo experience here is actually just one of those agents. We've turned off all of its communication tools here. We've actually just given it access to in this case, I think we're on Slate here as the instance. And you can actually just go off and engage with it on your data. And we want to help people understand what can happen here. So we do preload, hey, show me what you can do. And the agent's like, hey there, I'm an agent. I work in the enrollment office. I do all these things. But right now, my job is to show you what it's like to have one of these in your office. And so it actually first just prepped an analysis for me on deposit progress since May 1. And it actually is running full queries on top of our information. It is then writing individual programs to actually help process this. And then it live renders a dashboard that it actually wrote here. When I say wrote, like the agent coded that dashboard. And this is maybe one point I want to start with, Mickey. We don't think of this as a BI tool or like a reporting dashboard. We think of this more as this really awesome team member who is serving kind of as like a data analyst in addition to all these other jobs that it's playing in your office. And in this case, it can run really deep analysis. And then it can represent that to you in the way that it thinks you'll best understand it. And so it's chosen this visual, but we could change that. And it basically says, hey, here's where we're at. We're down a little bit in deposits. And it suggests, hey, do you want me to go and hunt this down? And so this is live running on an actual CRM. The data has been made synthetically, but it is a very good representation of, let's say, a medium-sized R1. So maybe I'll ask you, Mickey, like if you were showing up and you see here's where we are year over year in deposits. And the agent tells us we got a bit of a yield gap. There's a bunch of students that have accepted their offer but haven't deposited yet. And we're seeing even some geographic weird home state erosion in terms of deposits. Where would you go as an operator here?
So for context for the audience, we're recording this at the very end of May, right? So the May 1 standard deposit deadline is passed. I'm seeing we've got a lot of students there in limbo. I want to identify who are the students that I most likely, who did not deposit, that I most likely can convert. That to me would be an area where I can try to make up some ground at this point in time.
Love it. Yeah, it's a great thing to do. And here's we're not actually building a report or doing some sort of reporting dashboard. We're actually asking for analysis. That is actually an exceptionally complex thing, even though you can say that in a sentence, right? How do you actually answer this? So our agent already has come back. Good instinct. That's exactly the right question to be asking right now. Maybe we should tune down the sycophancy. But good question, Vicky. I agree, actually. It's a good question. Here's my plan. I want to profile these 1431 accepted but not deposited pool using engagement signals, portal activity, email opens, visit behavior, response timing. I'm going to rank them by conversion likelihood. I have a hunch that students who opened communications in the last 2 weeks but still haven't pulled the trigger are the highest value targets. Anything specific you want me to wait, or should I just build the full recovery segment?
Let's just do the latter. You just build the full recovery segment. Let's see what happens here.
Go for it. Nice. And as this is running, what's sort of very cool about AI now is that everything this agent is doing, you're going to see it's doing a lot of complex analysis. It's pulling a lot of data. It's modeling things. It's not doing that in context. So when we traditionally think about LLMs, and maybe if you're exposed to a ChatGPT or something, they're used to the agent basically predicting tokens. And the sort of famous LLMs are not very good at math is often because next token prediction is not very good at math. But the paradigm's really shifted with frontier agents that have access to a computer and are actually more so writing programs and software to do their analysis. So our agents aren't actually doing math here in their head mentally. They're writing the program that does the math. And over time, the agent can do a lot of detailed analysis that is much more sophisticated and hardened by calling multiple tools, writing a program in its computer, running that, getting the output, and then rendering some visual to me. Does that make sense?
Is that, with that in mind, is that helping reduce hallucinations or bad numbers? Because one of the things, that as a former enrollment leader myself, as a consultant who works with institutions around building and scaling their enrollment, one of the things I hear most often about the use of AI is they still call it hallucinations, but realistically, the numbers are off. Not that I've ever heard any institution not using AI say our numbers are exactly on and everybody has the same number when they run a report. I hear that the number's off all the time, whether or not AI is involved. But one of the fears of this is that I'm going to start asking this question and the numbers it gives me back are wrong. How does that shift in this conversation? Does it change? What's important to know about that?
Yeah, great question. So, well, I think on the first order, when you are actually writing programs and scripts and queries to pull information and process it, the surface area of getting that right is actually a lot more limited and is a really good thing that frontier models can do. A model can write a fantastic Python script that combines a number of properties into some computed output. And that's a lot more reliable than the agent literally running all the math. But the second order effect here is that the agent can also calculate this in multiple ways and confirm it gets the same answer. And this is one of the cool things that we've done in our agents. Behind the scenes, again, they're living in a computer. They have access to a file system. They use something called skills to help them do things. When we're doing really complex analyses, we like to ask our agents to verify in multiple ways. If I were actually in my CRM and I were trying to do a pretty detailed analysis, I'm probably not going to trust my first shot that I pull. I probably will think, okay, is there another way I can get this data? Let me just confirm that. And that's going to help me decide if I've actually pulled this correctly, especially if it's the first time I've ever done it. And the agent can do that because when it's actually running, it's literally running the first analysis and it spawns another one and it can compare it. And that's where not doing it in context is a lot more.
Awesome. And I see we're getting some, it's communicating with us about its progress.
Yes, this is actually really interesting. So as much as possible, we want the agent to signpost how long it's going to take. So it's going to take about a minute on this, it tells us, but it is actually doing multiple turns. This agent lives autonomously. It is running in the background and it is doing a pretty in-depth analysis and it's signposting what it's doing along the way. But now it's at a point now, I guess, where it's building the scoring model against a bunch of partitions of the communication outbox. And that was the engagement piece I was looking for. Like you might have an agent run for 20 minutes on something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been on calls with folks while they've had something running in the background. When I have worked with AI, if I'm creating a complex document, maybe I'm building out a PowerPoint or something, I see it run for several times. As the user of AI, that's generally when I shift. Let me go check a couple of emails while this is happening.
Yes.
And you come back, and I've literally done that where it was building a document for me. It took like 8 minutes to build, and
Yes.
I knocked out a few emails in those 8 minutes.
Yes, 100%. And what we're starting to observe too is that, again, because our agents are autonomous, a lot of this analysis, I actually don't need to be sitting here telling the agent what to do. In fact, a very cool higher order view you can take with your agent is maybe every day there's things I care to know. Maybe on a weekly basis, there are anomalies I want to be told about. Like if you actually take a moment and say, if I had perfect information about my enrollment operation, if I had, let's say, 20 dedicated data scientists that were constantly looking at things there, what would I want them to flag to me? Well, I can just tell my agent to do that, and it will just do that on a daily, hourly basis, like whatever you want. So I can say, yeah, at 8 p.m., I want you to be running this analysis every single night and send it to me on my desk in the morning. And the agent can do that. But actually, here you go. The agent's already started to finish and started to give us a little bit of a render here. So here is a pool. So just to maybe catch the audience back up, we were looking for who is that pool that is most likely to maybe be recoverable that we haven't yet gotten. And so the agent's gone off and pulled a bunch of things here. It's actually saying that there are 6,000 total students that it thinks are potentially in play, 227 that are maybe top priority, and it gives us their overall engagement rate. And it breaks them up into two buckets. These 227 actually have clicked an email in the last 2 weeks. They're still reading, they're still undecided, they have a high conversion likelihood, and it's like, hey, we should go reach out to these right here. And you'll notice the agent actually already gives me a button here I can click, which is kind of fascinating. So the agent isn't just an analyst, it is just an operator in the office. So this is the same agent that does outreach to students. This is the same agent that processes transcripts for our partners. So I can just tell the agent, yeah, let's go reach out to them. And I can have the agent go do it. But maybe I want my team to do it. I can have the agent produce the outreach for my team. It's sort of up to me. It's my operation.
And of course, once it drafts, I can give a draft to a team. If I wanted them to do a little bit more one-to-one, they can edit that draft for each student or just one version for themselves if they want. You have a lot of flexibility there.
I can even tell my agent, I want you to message all my team members with this plan. I want you to work with them to figure out what pool you'll take of theirs and what pool they'll take. And I want you to help them along the way. So let's say, yeah,
an add-on like that, because I'm thinking about, now I've got to copy and paste this. I've got to type up my mass to my team email. And you're saying, nope, Mickey, you're missing it. You don't have to do that. You just tell the agent, let's communicate this to the team.
Exactly. Every agent shows up for various segments, we call them. So one segment might be my staff. One segment might be my prospective students. One segment might be my faculty. Like maybe in this case, a faculty member can engage with this agent about some interesting task they're doing with respect to a recruitment. But so this is actually a vector of coordination. So if let's say I'm a VP of enrollment, I want to be very close to my data. I can talk to my agent all the time and then farm out tasks to my team via the agent. I think that's a very, very cool experience for starting.
Well, I think it's awesome. Now it might open the door for a new wave of micromanagement.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Possibly, but I do like that idea. And this is not just for the vice president of enrollment, right? This is, if I'm an individual counselor, I can be doing this just with my pool of prospective students, so that if I'm, assertive on my own and I want to do this and I want to maximize, I can be leveraging the agent directly myself. I don't have to wait for a director or a VP to go do that for me and then tell me what to do. I can start to do this. So when you think about as maybe a junior level staff member, I want to grow to be in a senior level position, understanding how to leverage AI to start to build out and work on my pipeline. I help to see a little bit more with some critical thinking and understanding how the class is evolving. I can see my own performance and improve upon that. This is a way to really kind of almost accelerate some of that learning.
I love that you said that, Mickey. If you actually even look at what we just did here, thinking intimately about our funnel in context of this crazy enrollment cycle we're in, thinking about what is actually happening today and what needs to happen to our students. Like that is the work that we should be doing in the enrollment office. Literally writing the query to pull the data and then like hitting a brick wall because it was wrong and then rewriting it and like there's some value creation there, but that's not the highest order value creation that we bring every day to show up. And I think what's kind of interesting about AI, there's some trepidation around it, but especially as we start to like see more of our partners engage with AI as a co-operator, it is actually elevating everyone to a higher level of productive work. We're like, yeah, the strategy you're bringing to this is actually the value you create. And it's also the thing that's more fun to do, and it's more inspiring for just why you're in this profession in the first place. And so freeing you from the shackles of writing the queries is this amazing arc of professional development that makes you necessarily have to be strategic. And that's what we need in our profession.
You know, I talk about this concept of AI as a thinking partner a lot. And I think this is a great demonstration of what that means, because it's not, hey, write an email for me. It's not, let me upload this and give me a number back. How do I begin to understand what's happening and what's shifting? And I know that these are our three primary strategies we have. How do I leverage those strategies back and forth, this dialogue, to help better define next steps, better create the story that you're trying to share with your team, with your leadership, about what's happening across the enrollment pipeline. So I really like this. Now, before we show some other things, because we could probably keep going for another hour if we wanted just right here, because even though this might be fictional data, I'm really dive in and start to see what else we could do. But it says draft an email. Is can it send an email? Are we that far along? And you're shaking your head yes. So if it can, if this is connected to my CRM, and let's just say you said in this instance, let's say this is Slate, is it sending it through Slate? How does that work?
So the agent very much is like an individual entity. It has its own email address and its own phone number.
That's right, because it's your AI recruiter.
Exactly. So it actually, like in this case, if I actually go and have it send an email, the agent is literally sending email from its email address. Now,
Does it log that into Slate?
yep, you can have that.
Okay.
Flow that back. Now, in many cases, though, maybe like I actually don't want the agent to send this email. Like I actually, for whatever reason, I want our team to do it. The agent can draft that email. I can tell the agent to go and ping my counselor in that territory to help them write the email. Like whoever sends the email should be the highest value person to send that email. In some cases, the agent does not. But the recognition we should send that email, and let's make it really good, and let's also track how it performed and make sure that's flowing back into our strategy. That's what the agent's going to make sure happens.
Yep. So what else do we want to show with this functionality?
Well, I think maybe the sort of last sort of two concepts I'll sort of call out, and I can share maybe some stories about what's happening with some of our partners here, is that it's once you kind of understand, okay, this is how an agent works, how it operates, and here's how you can use it on various problems. You have this mental model of, well, how can we give it access to more tools and a more interesting environment around it where it can create even more value for our office, right? Here's where we've done some very cool things on our platform. First, we realized that in many cases, you actually really want to predict things more, let's say, deterministically as you're operating. So it's one thing to have my agent every day go through and crawl things and maybe locally score students on something and help cause them to happen. But before Gen AI was cool, there was an OG AI called Predictive AI, where we do traditional machine learning. And that's really powerful, where you use like actually models to go and predict things. The problem with traditional machine learning is it's exceptionally powerful, but it's just very expensive. You got to have a data science team that puts together. And so we're like, well, our agents are really smart. They absolutely can train these things. And so one of the tools we actually give our agents access to is they have access to an entire machine learning ops environment, which you can think of as almost like their own dedicated cluster where they can train models on data. And so you can tell your agent, like, hey, I love your initial, let's say, deposit recovery analysis, but I want you to formally predict this based on all of our past cycles. Can you go and do the feature engineering, pull every single property that possibly could be valuable, create interaction terms, maybe you want to look at intertemporal effects, do all of that work, then go run 17 different model shapes against each other, see which one performs best on our holdout data, and then promote that into production. And that is actually just a tool call to our agent.
You're blowing my mind a little bit here. So what you described sounds really complex, but also really impactful on our ability to predict, understand, and take action before it's not reactionary. We always talk about, how do we become a little more proactive?
Yes.
This is that step forward. And I say it, what you described me sounds complex, but when it comes to putting this into reality and using it, not necessarily complex.
In fact, the actual process of training a machine learning model is very mechanical. The let's say interesting part is the feature engineering. what should we include? That's where the creativity emerges. And we actually find that agents are quite good at that, because when they have access to, let's say, 600 potential properties and they can think critically about the problem, they actually can promote those. And then you can actually verify, did it perform well, right? And obviously you have to avoid bias and all those things, but those are things that we actually help tune our agents around. But then once you get that model back, now you can say, cool, let's say our melt prevention arc is going to be driven ultimately by individual real-time melt scores that our agents have trained for us. And we can flow that back into our CRM. What we can also do is you can have your agent go and maybe stand up a custom application for you that becomes that command center that your team is then going to use, that instantiates those melt scores and tells you exactly who's most likely to melt. And that is actually, now the agent has both done a bunch of analysis for you, created a machine learning model that's going to drive your operation, and stands up the application itself that is point in time the right interface to guide your team on the task. And so we'll be showing a lot more of this over the coming weeks. We have a lot of cool stuff that we're launching. We have a bunch of schools that right now are really just trying to land the September class, and they're using every one of our capabilities to do it. And we're really excited about that.
That's really exciting. I can't wait to see some of those results. Hopefully those are some shared clients, so I get a chance to hear firsthand of those stories as they continue to grow. So I find all of this fascinating, and I see, I hate to use the word cutting edge, but that, as we look at the way the work will be done, we always say the future, but really we're saying it's available now. Like that's the way of the operation now. What does it look like 6 months from now? We started with just a voice agent in 2024. It's 2 years later. You've got agents across multiple channels to communicate: phone, text, typing, old school typing, I guess you could say. You've got all these different uses, all these different channels. What are we looking at 6 and 12 months down the road?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that the next 6 months, really, I would even say the next 18 months, just everywhere in the world, is this large arc of, let's say, operational transformation and adoption of this way of working. Like, I really do believe sometime around, I would probably personally say around September of 25, the models got good enough where this mode of really every operational task we do could be dramatically improved with AI in some way. But there is a longer arc of how do we catch up with how we do that well, how do we do it safely. Yes. And so it's the capabilities are actually way farther ahead of everyone's ability to adopt them. So I think the next 6 months look like this sort of collective figuring it out, how we deploy these. And what we're trying to do is make this a lot easier. And one abstraction we have in our platform, the idea of a project. Think of a project as almost like a really interesting bundle that you can just import to your agent that then stands up some amazing use case for you. And so let's say you want to go and train a machine learning model on Melt and you want to set up an application for that. That's just a project you just import. And within 10 minutes, you have that. And so we want to help our partners understand, here's all the different things you can do. And we'll just keep creating those. You can create them yourself. But that adoption arc is actually the bigger thing, and help people learn this new way of working, because it changes the way and I know you see this all the time, Mickey, in your personal AI stack. You think about problems differently once you get in the habit of working this way. I think the 6 months ahead is going to be the prime period of collective figuring it out.
So you mentioned with these projects, your partners could be building their own. Do you have that now with partners coming in to start their own building process as they learn?
Yeah, actually, a project ultimately, it's
I'm used to Claude projects, so yeah.
Yes, it's exactly. Yeah. It is think of it as a bundle of configuration that your agent can understand and instantiate in your instance. And so, I all the time observe our partners just doing some crazy cool thing with their agents I didn't realize. You can simply tell your agent, hey, can you actually export that to me as my final project zip file? And the agent knows how to actually package that as my next project. And then I can go and hand that over to a friend if I'm so inclined. And that's what we'd like to see. And in fact, I do think there'll be some interesting community-wide efforts we will try to bring together, because this is a really big shift. And in general, I've always observed, especially in higher ed, there's such a communal aspect to this. And I'd love to see groups sharing together insofar as they're comfortable what is working. And I think that first wave of even CRMs appearing on the scene in large part happened because everyone shared how to do this, right? And I think the same thing will happen with AI operations.
I agree. And from what I see, I agree. And I would say the next 6 months, thinking about how do we operationalize this, how do we adopt this, catching up is a hard piece, especially in this industry. We typically are a little behind some other industries when it comes to adopting and leveraging technology across an operation. Some of that is outdated technologies on our campus. ERP systems or SI systems might be a little dated sometimes, and that may have been a limiter. So finding that ability to adopt, I think, is critical. One of the things that stands out to me when I think about the adoption side, and I think we talked about this when you first showed me some of this, the ability to get this right is dependent upon the quality of the data that we have. I've not met anyone that says we've got perfect data. So, if I'm looking to, if I say this is amazing, I want to deploy this tomorrow, what do I need to be thinking about from my data to know that it's ready? Or maybe even, are there myths about data that I might have in my own head that I need to get rid of as I think about the ability of leveraging data for this?
Well, so for all of our early partners that had a first look at this, that was sort of the trajectory was, what is this? Wow, that's awesome. And then, oh no, my data. That was sort of the journey there. So our immediate reaction to that in question was, well, just for a second, let's imagine you really understand the data landscape in your institution, specifically, let's say your CRM. You know where the dragons are, but you're able to kind of manage around it. If we plucked you out and put you in a different institution, and you know there's probably weird data problems, like what would you do to understand that CRM so that you could then be effective on some reasonable amount of time to start to actually operationalize on the CRM? And we heard some amazing things. Everyone's like, well, I really would care to understand the decision codes in the institution. I really care to understand that weird thing we did in 2019 to change the way we track this thing. And we actually inventoried all those things, and we're like, that's a project. And your agent actually starts by first just doing an entire audit of your schema, your institution, your data within that, let's say in this context, the CRM, and actually surfaces you a bunch of things that are non-standard, odd, weird, orphaned records, duplicate records, weird decision coding, and actually does a little bit of an interview with you to go and actually parse those differences. And of course, this interview is very nice. It produces a really cool interface where you can actually type in things and actually provide those decision codes. But then it actually runs a quick validation arc of saying, all right, I think I understand your data. Let's run some tests here. I need you to tell me, point in time, how many applications have you received? Did you get this number? And if not, we need to diagnose that. And so we actually run through a little arc there with your CRM admin and get to that validation. And then that actually gets embedded as a per institution data dictionary within the agent's file system. And then it has access to it forever. And so that initial audit helps speed that along, and then plugging in the gaps and then verifying becomes this amazing foundation. So that's been the way we've approached it.
How long does that process take if I'm running that?
Well, the initial audit, if you just load in, that can be done in maybe 30 minutes. Agent will come back and say, here's what I found. And then from there, I do think it's important. Let's get the foundations right. You might spend an hour really going back and forth on validating queries. And by the way, that's a good use of time. Like if you want to spend 2 hours there, by all means, do that. But once you do, you have just added hundreds of hours back to the office.
Hundreds, maybe thousands, depending upon your data. So it sounds like give it that hour, be patient. If we were to, without AI, say we're going to go through this effort to clean up our data, half the staff would quit right then and there, unless you said, this is the person that we're bringing in to do it for you. No one wants to touch it. It's not fun work at all. And so knowing that you could say, okay, we're going to sit for an hour and go through this exercise back and forth with the agent to get it clean is a phenomenal shift in that. And I think it's going to be hard for some people to probably comprehend. They say it's an hour. It can't be an hour. I think that there are going to be people that think that. And I think until we get used to working with agents for these types of things to see the results in that time, I spent this week, by the way, cleaning up thousands of records in my own CRM. And I will tell you what took me probably 7 hours total to do for all those thousands. If I would have spent that same amount of time without AI supporting some of that cleanup, that would have been maybe 1,000 or 500, 600 to get it, the work that we did. So I absolutely know the value of that and can see where that expedited cleanup can happen. So I think that's phenomenal.
And with the agent as, again, this sort of long-running, multiple tool calling operator, it's not just necessarily doing a mechanical mapping. Like it's one thing to understand this is your decision code. Okay, fine. But it's actually like, I realize in 2019, our definition of entry term was different. It has these properties to it. We use this object over here. And so now when the agent's running that analysis feature, in its dictionary reference file, it's not just like mechanical code mapping. It's actually like, this is a concept. Any data that's 2019 related, we actually use this methodology for pulling it. And so the amount of mapping, it's not just Does that make sense? It's also
Well, absolutely makes sense.
yeah.
I see schools making these shifts, and what happens without this is someone has to remember the rules that when they do it themselves, and inevitably someone comes in who doesn't know the rules will run
Yes.
some type of report and they come back like, well, I don't know where this number comes from because I read it came out with this, and they don't know that, and yet that wrong number that they came up with hits a report somewhere and it's shared with someone else, and probably 40, 50 hours later, people diagnose what happened, and all that time spent trying to fix that or understand what happened. So I absolutely get that. I see it regularly. That's amazing. If there were two takeaways that you wanted folks listening today to have in their mind when they try to settle down and let all of this absorb, what would those be?
Number one, the pace of capabilities is very, very fast. So fast that you have to evaluate your AI strategy for where we're going to be 6 months from now, not today. And that is very, very important. You almost, even with the amazing things we see here, this is going to look primitive in 6 months. So that's takeaway number one. Number two, I think this idea that AI can show up in so many different ways. For your office, it might make sense to have AI that is like the friendly, smiling face that everyone interacts with. For your office, AI might be the person that picks up all the annoying work we don't want to do. It could be the person that is constantly just finding weird anomalies in our data. Insofar as you're operating and you have goals that you want to achieve, there's definitely a place where AI can be helpful. And I think our take is you got to figure out what that is and start there. And you can always expand, but like literally everything you do, you can leverage agents like this to help. And we'd certainly like to help you figure that out. But just begin. And it doesn't have to be your prior about where people are using AI. Any place is fair game.
So I'm trying to connect some dots here. So if I'm concerned about letting AI take over my communication with prospective students, that is not what all AI can be, and it doesn't have to be. And it doesn't mean if you don't want that, then you don't use AI, right? If you're worried about data being perfect, that's not all AI is, and you don't have to let that be. There are so many different ways that you can use it. And I think I commented on a post on LinkedIn today, or not today, this week about it. And I see three kind of groups of folks interacting, or when it comes to AI right now, like three kind of, you've got the early adopters out there testing the limits and then figuring out the adoption piece. How do we get this adoption happening and really get this embedded? Then I see a group that's out there also testing, trying, failing to get that adoption right, not seeing the results they thought, and are rethinking and trying to figure out why. Then there's a group that just aren't sure and are still sitting on the fence. The problem with that last group, because I understand the rationale behind that, the problem with the last group is you're a little behind. But when the middle group that's struggling with the adoption figures out the adoption, they catch up with the first group. And the gap between you and those other two groups is growing. And just as you said a moment ago, what this will look like in 6 months will make this look primitive. That growth, that pace is happening so fast, the gap between you and the others gets deeper, wider, and probably still harder to then figure out and leverage. When I think about helping schools adapt and adopt other AI and find the right use cases for them, sometimes those use cases that they start out of the gate, they have this really big idea in mind. And Zach, you might disagree with some of this, but I try to pull them back initially. First, let's start with something much smaller so that you can see the impact yourself directly and you start to understand it. And then our AI readiness becomes greater, and the greater it gets there, the better likely, or the more likely it would be for me to help myself and my team adopt it. Because I know anytime I get adoption where I want it to be, the ability to grow to the next thing, to grow and go to the next thing is easier to do. And so if you're still on the fence, start playing. Because one of the things I liked about this querying piece, the first thing that you showed, I can't tell you the number of times, and this is me and my specific personality type. If I didn't have the ability to figure that out before AI to run that on analysis, I wouldn't ask someone to do it for me because I know they've got so much on their plate. And so I just let it go. All these questions that I had that I never asked and never got an answer to, that just sat and died because I didn't want to add something else to someone's plate who was already full. I don't have to do that anymore because now AI doesn't have a full plate. I can ask that and think about that curiosity. Think about the questions that are just way out there that might take you 10 other questions to ask before you even think of that extra one that gives you that little piece of knowledge and that little nugget that you can really leverage to understand who those 286 people that are the high priorities. Just start diving and asking questions. The ability to have that opportunity that you just didn't have before, that's going to be a separator for folks. And you'll never get that if you don't start investigating, taking a few steps in and playing around. That is just so essential to this.
Totally agree. Very well said.
Well, let's pause there. Zack, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing this features and functionality. I think it is just, as you mentioned, this is just the entrance into this one, especially when it comes to analysis and understanding and taking that and turning it into the next level of what an admissions office can be. I think it's it. It really is. This is where we want to be. And as I tried to articulate that in some way over the past several months, for those that have heard me like, I don't know what he's talking about, it was this. This is what I was talking about. So thank you and your team for bringing this to the market and to our industry for folks to see and start leveraging.
I appreciate it, Mickey. Thanks so much for having me on here.
Yep. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me to another episode of Spark and Scale. I hope this has been valuable for you. If it has, please feel free to drop a like, give us a comment. If you have questions, drop them in there. I'll share those with Zack. I'm happy to get answers for you as you think about it. And don't forget, we'll have a link in the show notes. Zack mentioned that this is a publicly available agent that you can test around. We're going to put that link in there so that you can go directly to their site and start playing around investigating this for yourself. I highly encourage that so that you can begin to understand the ways that AI will help you in your work. Thank you again for listening, for watching, and we hope to see you next time.